Chapter 1. The whoops heard round the ship. The starship Zaldar shuddered violently as an alarm blared through the dimly lit corridors, sending alien crew members scrambling to their stations. In the heart of the engine room, amidst flashing red lights and the hum of struggling machinery, Sam Grayson muttered a single word under their breath. Whoops. In an instant, the room fell silent. Captain Vorin, a towering figure with deep blue scales and severe golden eyes, shot Sam a look that could freeze a supernova. Human Grayson, he hissed, his words clipped and icy. Explain yourself. Sam held up their hands defensively. It's just a minor issue. Nothing we can't handle. But as if defying Sam's words, another tremor shook the ship, the vibrations resonating through the steel floor. Captain Vorin's gaze grew even sharper, and his three-fingered hands tightened around the edge of the control panel. Minor? This sounds far from minor. At that moment, Lana, the ship's lead technician with iridescent lavender skin, glanced warily between Sam and the captain. She had heard stories about human improvisation, rumors of their reckless methods. Still, curiosity sparked in her violet eyes as she regarded Sam's casual stance in the face of potential disaster. Sam, she ventured, her voice a mix of caution and intrigue. What exactly did you do? Sam scratched the back of their neck, looking slightly sheepish. Look, the core drive was acting up. It's a sophisticated piece of tech, and it turns out the energy stabilizer, a component we humans designed, wasn't calibrated to handle the Zaldar's power output for this quadrant. So, I made a few adjustments. Captain Vorin's eyes narrowed to slits. You tampered with the core drive without authorization? Tampered is a strong word, Sam replied with a half shrug. More like enhanced. Temporarily. Lana's eyes widened in alarm. Enhanced? Do you know how sensitive that drive is? One wrong calibration, and it could destabilize the whole ship. Sam raised a finger, undeterred. Only if you don't know what you're doing. Which I do. Mostly. The captain leaned in, his face inches from Sam's. Mostly. Hey, Captain, relax, Sam said, holding up their palms in what they hoped was a reassuring gesture. It's fine. This isn't my first rodeo. But the blank stares that followed reminded Sam that idioms didn't always translate well across interstellar crews. Lana's voice broke the silence. But Sam, we're not in the Terran Quadrant. We're currently entering the edge of the Scarab Nebula, a zone known for unstable energy fields and extreme gravitational shifts. Sam winced. Well, yes, but I figured we'd have enough time to adjust course. Didn't expect the stabilizer to act up so soon. They glanced over the data feed, muttering, guess that's what I get for assuming alien space follows Terran rules. The ship lurched again, sending tools clattering from their mounts. In the eerie quiet that followed, Dr. Tallis, the ship's chief scientist and a solemn figure with a head crested in silver scales, entered the engine room. His face was etched with disbelief as he absorbed the scene. I heard the alarm. Is it true? He asked, eyeing Sam with a mixture of wariness and irritation. You enhanced the core drive? Sam offered a weak smile. Enhanced, optimized, it's semantics. Document, trust me. Dr. Tallis crossed his arms. Enhancements aside, can you stabilize it before we're caught in the nebula's energy currents? Sam's gaze flicked to the display screen. The swirling, pulsating glow of the Scarab Nebula loomed closer, a galaxy-sized storm of energy ready to tear apart anything unshielded. If I had another stabilizer, I could swap it out and recalibrate everything properly, they admitted. But without one, I'll have to improvise. Captain Vorin's scaly brow creased. You humans and your improvisation. This is not a time for shortcuts. Sam clenched their jaw, suddenly serious. Improvisation isn't a shortcut, it's a strategy. You're always prepared for the expected, but what happens when the unexpected comes knocking? They glanced at the data stream, noting the increasing energy fluctuations. I can handle this, but I need you to trust me. A tense silence filled the engine room. The aliens exchanged glances, clearly unused to such unconventional approaches. To them, every mission detail was meticulously planned and executed. The idea of winging it felt not only strange but sacrilegious. Lana, though, stepped forward. Captain, I'll assist Sam. I've seen their work, and I think they know what they're doing. Captain Voren's jaw tightened, but he gave a curt nod. Fine, but if this goes wrong, the consequences will be on both of you. Sam grinned, cracking their knuckles. All right, let's get to work. They darted over to the control panel, fingers flying across the keys, rerouting energy flow and monitoring for irregularities. Lana, I'll need you to monitor the stabilizer output, Sam said, their voice steady but quick. If it spikes above the yellow line, pull the auxiliary power feed. It'll buy us time. Lana nodded, already at the ready. The hum of the machinery intensified as Sam made delicate adjustments, eyes narrowed with laser focus. A sudden surge blared on the monitor. Now! Sam barked, and Lana yanked the lever. Sparks flew, and the lights flickered dangerously, but the output steadied just above the danger threshold. Sam let out a breath, but there was no time to relax. The ship's hull groaned as they moved closer to the nebula. Another fluctuation would push the stabilizer past its limit. Almost there, Sam murmured, beads of sweat gathering on their brow. They adjusted one final setting and watched as the readings held, steadying at last. A small cheer escaped Lana's lips, but it was short-lived as Captain Voren's voice cut through. Human Grayson, report. Have we escaped the worst of it? Sam exhaled, fingers hovering over the console. For now. But we need a full stabilizer replacement, or this patch will only hold for so long. Captain Voren's eyes darkened, but there was a hint of reluctant respect. I still question your methods, human, but it appears you may have saved us. Sam smirked, wiping their forehead. See, Captain? Sometimes all it takes is a little whoops and a whole lot of heart. Voren's gaze lingered on them, considering, but he merely grunted before walking away, leaving Sam and Lana to share a brief look of victory. In the silence that followed, the engine hummed, steady for now. But they all knew the journey through the Scarab Nebula had only just begun. Chapter 2. Into the Scarab Nebula. The air in the Zaldar's control room buzzed with tension as the ship drifted closer to the edge of the Scarab Nebula. The nebula's chaotic energy was tangible, sending an unsettling hum through the hull, almost as if the storm outside were trying to pry its way into the vessel. Sam steadied themselves against the control panel, eyes locked on the readings flickering across the monitor. Lana, what's the stabilizer status? Sam's voice cut through the silence, firm and unwavering. They glanced over, catching a glimpse of her worried expression. Her fingers glided across her own monitor, pulling up data from the recent repair. Still holding barely, she replied, her voice thin but calm. We're at 40% capacity. It might buy us a few hours if the strain doesn't increase. Sam let out a slow breath, but there was no room for relief. They were on borrowed time, with a malfunctioning stabilizer and no replacement in sight. Captain Voren's footsteps echoed through the control room as he entered, a cloud of silent tension following him. What's our status, Human Grayson? His tone was even, but there was an edge of suspicion, as if he was bracing for another unexpected whoops. Sam met his gaze, refusing to back down. We've stabilized the drive, temporarily, but without a spare part, it's a matter of time before it fails completely. And given the turbulence out there, Sam gestured to the viewing port, where swirls of brilliant greens and purples danced like solar flares, a galaxy-wide storm stretching beyond sight. Captain Voren's gaze followed, his expression unreadable. I am aware of the nebula's dangers, he said, his voice quieter. This journey is not one we would undertake lightly, but we are expected on Gathrax Prime. Turning back now is not an option. Sam clenched their fists, wrestling with frustration. Then we need a solution that doesn't involve hoping this ship holds up. There's got to be something we can use on board, some equipment we can repurpose. Lana perked up, glancing at Sam. Wait, what if we use the backup generator? We could redirect some of its power to keep the stabilizer steady, extend its functionality. Voren tilted his head, the alien equivalent of a raised eyebrow. Diverting energy from the backup? If the core fails and we lose power, we'll be stranded with no support system. Sam's eyes narrowed, a spark of determination igniting. It's a risk, but so is flying into this nebula with a stabilizer on its last leg. At least this way, we have a fighting chance. A silence fell over the room as Vorin considered, his gaze shifting between Sam and Lana. Finally, he gave a tight nod. Very well. We proceed with this plan. But you both will be responsible if it fails. Without another word, Sam turned back to the control panel, already mapping out the process. Lana, I'll need your help redirecting the power flow manually. The automation isn't built for this. Lana nodded, a flicker of nervousness in her eyes. Understood. I'll grab the toolkit. She headed off toward the storage bay, her footsteps echoing down the corridor. Once she was gone, Vorin fixed Sam with a penetrating stare. Human Grayson, do you have any idea of the importance of this mission? Of what's at stake? Sam paused, meeting his gaze. Honestly, Captain, I don't. But I know it's important enough for you to risk everyone's lives. And that's all I need to know. Vorin's eyes narrowed. There are artifacts aboard, rare minerals essential to the Gathrak civilization. Minerals that could tip the balance of power in this quadrant. And we are entrusted with their safe transport. Sam raised an eyebrow. So it's a political mission? Not entirely. It is more a question of survival. Without these resources, Gathrak's prime may be lost. Vorin's tone was grim. It is my duty to ensure we arrive, no matter the cost. Sam nodded, their resolve hardening. Then we'd better make sure this stabilizer holds. Lana returned with a toolkit, her expression a mix of focus and determination. She knelt beside Sam, prying open a panel to access the auxiliary power grid. Sam moved beside her, hands deftly working to connect wires and reroute energy flow, the hum of electricity filling the space around them. Ready? Sam asked, glancing at Lana. She nodded, hands steady. Ready? With a deep breath, Sam flipped the switch, sending a surge of energy from the backup generator into the stabilizer. The ship jolted, a deep rumble echoing through the hull, and the lights flickered ominously. But then, to Sam's relief, the readings on the monitor stabilized, the power levels steadying at a safe threshold. We did it, Lana breathed, her voice barely above a whisper. Captain Vorin's expression softened, just a fraction. Impressive, Human Grayson. Perhaps there is more to your methods than mere recklessness. Sam allowed themselves a small grin. Improvisation has its perks, Captain. Just as the tension in the room began to ease, the ship's proximity alarm blared. On the main screen, a massive energy surge appeared, emanating from deep within the nebula and heading straight for them. Oh, you've got to be kidding me, Sam muttered, eyes widening. Lana's hands flew to the controls, frantically inputting evasive maneuvers. This isn't good. If we're hit by that wave... Sam's mind raced, adrenaline coursing through them. Is there any way to boost the shields? Captain Vorin shook his head. Not without further draining our power. We're at maximum capacity. Desperation gripped Sam as the energy surge grew closer, a shimmering wall of destructive force. They glanced at the controls, an idea forming, a crazy, risky idea. We could try venting the plasma reserves, Sam suggested, fingers hovering over the command. If we release it at just the right moment, it might act as a buffer. Deflect the wave long enough for us to get clear. Captain Vorin's eyes flashed with alarm. Venting plasma so close to a nebula? That's suicide. Maybe, Sam replied, their voice steady. But it's our best shot. For a moment, Vorin hesitated. But then he gave a sharp nod. Do it. With a deep breath, Sam punched into commands. The hum of the ship intensified, a sharp hiss echoing as the plasma vents released. In a heartbeat, a burst of shimmering energy erupted from the ship, meeting the incoming surge head-on. The resulting shockwave rattled the Zaldar, throwing. Chapter 3. The Eye of the Nebula. The Zaldar quivered, battered by the shockwave as it absorbed the brunt of the plasma explosion. Every bolt, every fiber of the ship seemed to groan under the pressure. Sam's hands gripped the console, fingers white-knuckled, waiting to see if their desperate maneuver had paid off. A beat passed. The lights flickered, but the readings stabilized. The ship was holding. Sam's relief was brief, though, as Captain Voren's voice cut through the tense silence. "Human Grayson," he said, the undercurrent of suspicion giving way to something that might have been respect. "You're either the luckiest being I've ever met or the most reckless." Sam shrugged, a faint smirk twitching at the corner of their mouth. "Maybe a bit of both, Captain." Voren's gaze lingered on Sam for a moment before he turned his attention to the viewing screen. The ship had emerged into the heart of the Scarab Nebula, an alien realm of brilliant energy. Wisps of iridescent light curled around the Zalthar, dancing like ghostly specters. The sensors showed readings off the charts, electromagnetic surges crackling across the hull. We're in the eye," Lana whispered, almost reverently. Her eyes were wide, reflecting the swirling colors outside. "This place, it's like nothing I've ever seen." Sam took a moment to absorb the sight as well. The beauty was undeniable, but it only masked the peril. The eye of the nebula was where its magnetic fields were most unpredictable. The swirling energy posed an even greater risk, especially with the ship's compromised stabilizer. "We won't have long here," Voren warned, his voice low and tense. "The artifacts we carry are extremely sensitive to magnetic fields. We must press on, and fast." Sam nodded, pulling their gaze from the mesmerizing view outside. "Captain, if we're going to make it out of this nebula in one piece, I suggest recalibrating the shield matrix. With the magnetic interference here, a standard configuration will just break under the pressure." Voren considered this, his gaze hardening. "And you believe you can manage this reconfiguration, given what we've been through so far?" Sam replied, shooting him a confident look. "I don't see why not." Lana jumped in, already tapping commands on her console. "Sam's right, Captain. With some fine-tuning, we might be able to create a feedback loop to reinforce the shield strength. But it'll require precise timing, or it could overload the system entirely." The stakes were high, and they all knew it. A single misstep could mean destruction in the heart of the nebula. But there was no other choice. "Do it," Voren commanded, his tone a mixture of urgency and authority. "Every second counts." Sam and Lana exchanged a look and began working in unison, adjusting power allocations and modulating shield frequencies. As the calculations came together, a subtle tension rippled between them, an unspoken understanding that failure was not an option. "Power levels are fluctuating," Lana reported, her fingers flying over the controls. "We need to balance them precisely, or the shield will destabilize." "Got it," Sam replied, focusing intensely. The hum of the ship grew louder, and a faint vibration pulsed through the floor, increasing with each adjustment. Sam wiped a bead of sweat from their forehead, fighting to keep their minds sharp. As they finished the calibration, a soft beep echoed from Sam's console. "It's ready," they announced, their voice steady despite the adrenaline racing through their veins. "Activate," Voren commanded. Sam punched the final sequence, and the shield crackled, a shimmering blue aura enveloping the ship. It pulsed, stabilizing against the nebula's energy field, and the readings on the monitor steadied. "Shield is holding," Sam confirmed, exhaling a breath they hadn't realized they were holding. But just as they began to relax, a new alarm blared, its shrill tone filling the control room. Lana's face went pale as she read the screen. "Captain, we have company." On the main viewer, a massive vessel appeared, emerging from the nebula's depths like a phantom. Its sleek, black hull reflected no light, as if it were absorbing the energy around it. Sam's heart skipped a beat. They'd heard rumors about ships like these, stealth vessels from the Dark Fleet, infamous in the Quadrant for raiding ships without leaving a trace. "What are they doing here?" Sam muttered, though they already had an idea. If the Dark Fleet knew about the artifacts on board, they wouldn't let Zalthar leave this nebula intact. Voren's expression grew grim. "They're here for the cargo, undoubtedly, and they will not relent until they have it." Sam's mind raced. Fighting wasn't an option, not in this weakened state, and certainly not against a Dark Fleet cruiser. But they couldn't let the artifacts fall into enemy hands. They had to think fast. "Captain," Sam said, a bold idea forming. "The nebula's magnetic storms. They're unpredictable, right? Voren nodded cautiously. Yes, but I don't see how that helps us. Sam tapped the monitor, pulling up the ship's position within the nebula. If we head deeper into one of the denser magnetic fields, it might interfere with their tracking systems. They'd lose us in the chaos. It's a dangerous plan, Voren replied, his eyes narrowing. Our stabilizer could fail, and we might not find our way out. True, Sam agreed, but staying here means a guaranteed encounter. We either risk the unknown or face certain death. Lana's voice wavered, but she nodded in agreement. Sam's right. We might be able to use the nebula to our advantage. At least we'll have a chance. Voren hesitated for a fraction of a second before nodding. All right, take us deeper. The Zaldar lurched forward, plunging into the heart of the nebula. Outside, the colors intensified, wrapping around the ship in violent swirls. The magnetic fields grew stronger, throwing their instruments into a frenzy. Sam's stomach twisted as the ship rattled, every jolt feeling like the last. Hold steady, Sam called, gripping the controls tightly. The Dark Fleet ship followed, but its movement was less fluid, hesitant, as if the magnetic fields were wreaking havoc on its systems. The shadows of the nebula grew denser, and gradually, the Dark Fleet vessel's lights faded from their scanners, swallowed by the storm. They've lost us, Lana whispered, hardly daring to believe it. But Sam wasn't ready to celebrate. They were still deep within the nebula, with a damaged stabilizer and limited power reserves. They needed a way out and fast. Captain, Sam began, scanning the readings, I think I can plot a course that'll lead us to a less volatile pocket. It's risky, but it's our best bet. Voren nodded, his eyes sharp with determination. Then do it. Get us out of here, human Grayson. Sam's fingers flew over the controls, punching in coordinates, each number a calculated risk in the nebulous maze. The ship groaned under the strain, but Sam pressed forward, their heart pounding as they guided the Zaldar through the storm. The lights flickered once more, but as the last surge of energy crackled outside, they broke through, a glimmer of open space at the nebula's edge. Chapter 4, Out of the Shadows. The Zaldar asterisk shuddered as it finally broke free of the nebula's chaotic hold, emerging into a pocket of clear, star-filled space. The sudden calm felt almost unreal after the relentless storm of the Scarab Nebula. Sam, Lana, and Captain Voren barely had a moment to breathe before their consoles lit up with an ominous warning. Captain, Lana exclaimed, her eyes widening as the sensor readout flashed. The Dark Fleet vessel, it's still on our tail. They managed to track us through the last burst of the nebula. Voren's jaw tightened, his voice low and grim. They're persistent, I'll give them that. Sam leaned forward, scanning the data with a fierce focus. The cruiser's dark shape loomed behind them, a menacing silhouette against the stars. Captain, if they catch us now, they'll tear us apart. We're almost out of power and ammunition. The tension in the bridge grew palpable as they all recognized the gravity of their situation. There was no nebula to hide behind now, no storm to obscure their trail. This was it. Options? Voren asked, though he didn't seem hopeful. Just one, Sam replied, a glint of determination in their eyes. We can use the artifacts. Lana's head snapped toward Sam, horror etched into her expression. Sam, those artifacts, they're unstable. We don't even fully understand their power. You're suggesting we use them as a weapon? Sam met her gaze steadily. It's that or let the Dark Fleet take them. You know what they do with this kind of power in their hands. Voren considered this, his gaze flicking between Sam and the looming cruiser on the viewer. How do you plan to use them? We could channel the energy into a focus pulse, an overload. It might create enough of a shockwave to disable their systems, at least temporarily, Sam suggested, knowing full well the risk. If anything went wrong, the artifacts might not just disable the enemy vessel, but take the Zaldar with it. Voren looked at them both, his face etched with resolve. Do it. We're out of choices. Lana's fingers hesitated over the console before she steeled herself and started rerouting power to the artifact's containment field. Her voice was barely a whisper. This is either going to save us or destroy us. Sam worked quickly, fingers flying across the controls as they adjusted the ship systems to contain the sudden surge of energy. The artifact's casing began to glow, faint tendrils of light seeping through the reinforced glass as the containment struggled to hold their power. Sam, Lana whispered urgently, the artifacts, they're destabilizing faster than expected. I'm not sure the containment field will hold. Sam clenched their jaw, redirecting more power into the shield matrix. Just a few more seconds. Come on. The hum of the artifacts grew louder, reaching a fever pitch. The lights on the bridge dimmed as power surged into the containment field, and everyone braced, feeling the energy pulsing through the ship like a heartbeat. Now! Sam shouted, slamming the final command. A blinding pulse of energy erupted from the artifacts, coursing through the Zeller's hull and into the void, aimed directly at the pursuing cruiser. The wave hit the dark fleet vessel with an intense burst, causing its lights to flicker and die as its systems overloaded. They're losing power, Lana exclaimed, relief flooding her voice. For a moment, silence hung heavy in the air. Sam's shoulders sagged, exhaustion threatening to take over. But then the console began to flash with yet another alert. Captain, Sam said, voice weary but alert. The artifacts, they're destabilizing completely. We've lost containment. Voren's face turned pale. Can we eject them? Lana's hands flew to the controls, but she shook her head. It's too late. They're generating a massive surge. And if we can't contain it, a loud rumble shook the ship, a high-pitched whine reverberating through the bridge. Sam fought to stay upright, shouting over the noise. If we reroute all non-essential power, we might stabilize them, but it'll leave us vulnerable. Do it, Voren ordered, his voice unwavering. We'll take the risk. Sam and Lana diverted everything they could spare into the containment, the ship going dark as even life support systems were reduced to bare minimum. For a long moment, they held their breath, watching as the containment field flickered, threatening to collapse completely. Then, miraculously, the readings began to level off, the surge stabilizing just enough to avoid a full meltdown. The crew let out a collective breath, but Sam's gaze remained fixed on the screen, where the now-disabled Dark Fleet cruiser drifted, powerless and stranded. What do we do with them, Captain? Lana asked quietly, her voice subdued after the chaos. Voren stared at the screen, a mixture of relief and calculation crossing his face. We're low on power and resources. Pursuing them isn't an option, but we've bought ourselves a chance. Enough to escape. Course plotted back to Federation space. Sam reported, weary but relieved. We're free. Voren nodded, his expression softening ever so slightly. You did well, Human Grayson. I might have been skeptical of your methods, but you've proven your worth. Sam grinned, offering a salute that was more humor than formality. Just another day in the life, Captain. The bridge filled with a quiet calm as the Zaldar turned away from the defeated cruiser, engines thrumming gently as they powered up just enough to begin the long journey home. As they drifted into the vastness of space, the swirling colors of the nebula fading behind them, Lana broke the silence, her voice almost reverent. We've just witnessed something incredible and survived. Sam glanced at her, a hint of a smile playing at their lips. I think I'll settle for surviving. The journey back was quiet, the crew exhausted but at peace. They'd faced the dark reaches of the nebula, the wrath of a ruthless enemy, and the raw, unchecked power of the artifacts. They had emerged from the shadows stronger, with scars that would become stories, and a bond forged by shared survival. The stars stretched endlessly ahead, and for the first time in a long while, Sam felt something they hadn't felt in years: hope. In the stillness, with the universe unfurling around them, the Zaldar sailed forward, a small speck of life and resilience against the vast, unyielding darkness.